Hey guys, this is Emma from Aeobhel here. This week I've got another watercolour comparison video for you, but instead of testing different price points, I'm going to be testing different mediums in a way. So what we've got here are my Winsor Newton Watercolour Brush Markers and my Winsor Newton pans. And yeah, I thought I'd lay them down side by side and see how they compare in terms of vibrancy, granulation, flow, things like just to see how they are to work with. Just like last time, I'll only be using the primary colours. I think that'll help balance the playing field a bit. But yeah, we'll be painting these two guys. Very groovy. Let's get started. Hey guys! Alright, so before we get into the results, I would like to make a quick little disclaimer. The way that you saw me paint with the watercolour markers is not the only way to do it, obviously. You can go straight in on the page with the marker and then bring your water over and like bleed it out to get some cool like shading effects. I chose not to do that for a number of reasons. One, because I was just using the primaries, it's a lot easier for me to just scribble the colours I need to on my palette and then mix them together with water and bring them over. And B, just in general, that's how I prefer painting because you're able to control the amount of water you bring over, like the concentration of the colour, and it really helps you get a nice smooth wash as opposed to having a really dark patch bleed out into white. That being said, it's not the only way to paint, so just keep that in mind. Getting on to the actual results now, first of all I'll tell you what colours I used. So for the markers, I've got cadmium red hue, I've got cadmium yellow hue, and I've also got phthalo blue green shade. Now for the pans, I'm like 95% sure that I used Cobalt Blue Deep. I also used Vermilion Hue and Transparent Yellow. Alright, so I'm pretty sure they're the colours I used going off this chart. It's a little bit hit or miss, but I'm pretty sure. The first thing I notice when I look at them, like straight away, is the amount of granulation. Yes, I will put a cap on the amount of times I say granulation. I know last time I said it maybe a little bit too much, but I think it is an important aspect of watercolour, and it is definitely very visible when you're comparing these two pieces. So the pans have a lot more granulation. The markers actually have close to none, which, I mean, it's not a good or a bad thing, it just depends on what you like and what you're using the paints for. Even like on my palette, you'll see the oranges and the blues separate, and like I think my palette looks nicer than my actual painting. It looks really, really pretty. I'll put a clip in so you can see what I'm talking about. But yeah, in the painting, the blues and the oranges really did separate, and that's most evident in the darker areas. So you've got like the hair and the shadows of the face, where you see these like nice little streaks of blue, and it's quite a cool effect. In the marker drawing, it's like a very clean, straight wash, which is quite nice. Like, you know, if you're doing like a children's book and you wanted more like pastel, neutral, precise colours, the markers are definitely going to get you some great results. Even just looking at these little rainbows I painted, you can see like the way the colours interact with each other with this rainbow are a lot different to this rainbow. Here they still bleed nicely and interact with each other, but here you can see like the different pigments like layering over each other, and they separate into the sort of hills and valleys of the paper, and it just, yeah, like it gives you a very nice dimension and depth to the painting. So yeah, it's not inherently good or bad, the level of granulation. You need to play around with your paints, and it all depends on what you're using them for. One note I will make about the pans though is just from my experience using them with other pieces, the different pans have different properties, and that's something that I don't find with the markers. I think the markers are all very consistent. The only thing that changes is the colour, you know what I mean? Like they're all gonna behave the same way, whereas with the pans, and I would assume the tubes as well, I don't have the tubes, but I mean, I think it's a pretty safe assumption. The different paints have different qualities, so some will granulate more than others, some won't granulate at all, some will blend really, really nicely and like form really harmonious sort of colour schemes, and others will separate themselves out. So again, it's a good or a bad thing. It might be a little bit harder for you to find a paint or like a palette of colours that you love and are really familiar with, just because it does take a little bit of like playing around to get used to it. But if you want that sort of depth and that interest in your paintings, it's definitely worth, you know, playing around and at least experimenting with the pans to see if that's what you like. You know, don't discount it straight away. Like you really do get some cool results. Hey guys, I'm just gonna slide in a quick note about vibrancy and transparency and light fastness as well, perhaps. So looking at the pictures here, like just this painting, they both appear to have the same level of vibrancy and transparency. Okay, that is because of how I used them though. Like if you did take these markers straight onto the page, obviously you would get a much punchier colour. But just like, you know, if you use less water when mixing with the pans, you would also get a much more saturated colour. So it does depend how you use them, but it's important to know that they both have that capacity to be quite like bright. I would say, however, that the markers do lend themselves to be a little bit more on the transparent side, whereas of course with the pans you do get variation depending on which pigment you're actually using, and there is a lot more versatility in that aspect. The markers, all of them, I do find are quite transparent, which is good. Like that's what watercolour is, you know what I mean? It is meant to be like a transparent medium. And I do think that these colours are really great if you're looking to get like a pastel vibe. You know, if you water it down nicely, you get these light sort of these light little pops of colour, which are quite pleasant, you know. So yeah, if you were looking to do more pastel work, these are great. Again, like they can be used for more saturated, bright colour, but I just find that more commonly my work looks very light. You know, I'm not an expert here. I'm just sitting in my bedroom playing with paint. So sorry if I like don't sound very professional, but that's just because I'm not, you know. I'm not professional at all. This is just my opinion, you know. So yeah, now in terms of light fastness, these markers, or at least most of them, do have a light fastness rating. I believe, yeah, these two have a light fastness rating of 2. This one doesn't have one for some reason. I guess maybe this colour isn't particularly light fast, or perhaps it was from a different batch. I wouldn't be too sure the reason why. But in general, like no matter how light fast your paint claims to be, if you were selling an original or displaying it, I would always recommend to keep it out of direct sunlight anyway. Like if you want the painting to last as long as possible, that's just like a basic precaution you should be taking. Even getting like UV filter glass, depending on like how badly you want to maintain the painting. But yeah, like I think the Winsor Newton, obviously, each paint again has a different light fastness rating. Yeah, my guess would be that the pans would be slightly more light fast and durable. But that's just speculation. I'll leave an annotation somewhere down below when I actually do some research. But yeah. I think that's it. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them down below and I will do my best to answer them in the comments. Just because, yeah, I probably have forgotten something. But yeah, I think I'm done. I think that's it. Alright guys, I hope you have a lovely week. I will see you next time. And cut! And I hope that this gave you some insight into the different results you can get with the different Winsor Newton mediums. That being said, I love how both of them turned out. I think this is a really groovy little drawing, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you!